All right, I'm Nancy Eckerly. I'm the director of the Jasper Chamber, and on behalf of the Chamber, I welcome everyone here this morning. We want to thank our legislators and the media for attending, and especially for WJTS TV 18 for being our host this morning. Erin, we'll go ahead and let you start with your 15 or so minutes of comments, and if everyone else would please mute yourselves, that would be great. You can leave your video on if you'd like, but go ahead and mute your microphones. Thank you and welcome.
Good morning, Nancy. Thank you for having us, and thank you for this format of the legislative update. I've got a few bills that I've been working on that I just like to highlight, and then one that we're working on collaboratively in the Senate. First would be the one we're working on collaboratively in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 407. Several legislators filed bills to give the legislature more say in any time we are under an emergency declaration. During the global pandemic, during the coronavirus pandemic, really the legislature had no ability to weigh in on decisions that were made at the executive level. And not that, I mean, we are desiring in Senate Bill 407 to just have a seat at the table and to give the legislature an opportunity to guide the governor's decisions with these executive orders. I think we're now under the 11th executive order. Each lasts 30 days and they can be renewed. The only way to end an executive order would be to pass a joint resolution in the House and Senate and end the order. When we're not in session, we can't do that. So we're back in session now, and we're trying both to find a way out of the end of the pandemic and to hopefully pass legislation that will not that will allow the legislature to have input. So the structure currently in Senate Bill 407, it gives at the start of an emergency, it requires that the governor coordinate with and work with the legislative council. Then we get into a period where after 30 days, that's when we're looking at extending. If he's looking at extending the order, then potentially the General Assembly could come in and grant an extension, or he could have one extension. We're looking at time, like space and time in the state. So 9 counties or less, he could declare an order that wouldn't kick in the statute, but 10 counties or more would. So let's say something was taking a wave approach across the state and the first 9 counties are declared an emergency, he could operate under that. But once the 10th county would take effect, then that would kick in this legislation, which would have some legislative approval. At some point, if he does not call us back into special session, or if he does back into session, then we can extend and provide advice and consent. If he does not extend the executive order, or if he doesn't extend the executive, or if he tries to extend the executive order and doesn't call us back into session, then that would end the executive order and he'd have to operate under our current laws. So many things happened during the pandemic. Hindsight is always 20/20, but we really feel that the General Assembly, particularly on budgetary matters, should have a say and should have had a say. We represent our citizens who were, faced with these restrictions, and we should be able to weigh in on their behalf. So that's the intent of Senate Bill 407, and it may change as it goes through the process, but we are collaboratively working on it. Many senators are collaboratively working on that piece of legislation. And I know there's a companion bill in the House. 3 bills that I'm working on. One is Senate Bill 353. 353 is an elections law along the same line. During the pandemic, you were able to obtain an absentee ballot by mail or online. So you could mail in a form or fill out the online form, and a ballot could be sent to you without providing proof of identity. We have a voter ID law. When you show up to vote in person, when you show up to vote at the polls, you have to show your ID to verify who you are. But when you were printing an absentee ballot application online and filling it in and sending it in, or filling in the online application, you didn't have to provide any proof of who you are. So we're requiring the driver's license number or the social security number, last 4 digits of the social security number when you ask for your ballot. That is just an election security measure. In addition to that, we saw across the country there were several states that election laws were changed by executive branches or by courts. And we are making it clear in Senate Bill 353 that the only body that can change the time, manner, and place of an election is the General Assembly, as is constitutionally required. So Senate Bill 353 says that neither the Election Commission or an elected executive can change the time, manner, or place of the election. That responsibility lies exclusively with the General Assembly. Senate Bill 352 is a broadband bill. Senator Messmer and I have worked many hours on broadband legislation, including the creation of the Next Level Connections broadband grant program that the governor put $100 million in, and we've seen 2 phases of grants go out under that program. In the current budget, I believe the House has committed $250 million to this program, and the governor has pledged another $100 million. So I do believe we'll see more money coming into the broadband expansion fund, and Senate Bill 352 is a way to make sure that the existing program has a process by which we're ensuring that federal dollars are used first, that if we receive federal dollars, those go out first over our state dollars. We're reserving those. And also, we've had some instances of overbuilding. So, grant applications being kicked out of the process. So in Crawford County, for instance, we had a grant application that was contested in phase 1 of the program, and it kicked out the entire applicant. And the challenger had no intention of expanding broadband, had no intention of investing in further technology. So we don't want to have a provider just simply be able to challenge without a negotiation process. So that's where we are with Senate Bill 352, and it's really just an effort to streamline the process and make sure that every dollar is going where it's needed most. Senate Bill 301 is a DCS oversight bill. You may know I used to work for DCS. I was a family case manager for a few years, and now I serve on the Family and Children Services Committee. And we've seen over the last several years a number of child fatalities that had prior DCS involvement. Many states track not only child fatalities, but they track near fatalities. And so we've also seen some cases where a child might nearly die but survives and has had DCS involvement. Our annual child fatality review report will talk about things like the what they say the likely cause of death is, for instance, co-sleeping, accidental drowning, sudden infant death syndrome. But the report does not really discuss in any great detail whether a child had prior DCS involvement. And so what we're doing in Senate Bill 301 is to take the local child fatality review committees, allow them to also look at near fatalities, report that to the state child fatality review committee, which will also then begin looking at near fatalities. And then we create a legislative oversight committee that can review those reports and any other reports that deal with DCS, as well as take concerns from foster parents or the public if an issue should arise that they feel is unsafe, et cetera. So the DCS bill I did file last year, it died in the House. I brought it back again, and we're continuing to work on that. It's just very important that these children are most vulnerable, and we are their elected representatives. And we not only represent these children and families, but foster parents, et cetera. And it is our greatest duty to ensure that these kids are safe and well cared for, particularly when they become wards of the state. And kids are coming in and out of the home. Their DCS will place them in foster care, and then sometimes those children go home, and then sometimes those children have poor outcomes. And so we want to have legislative eyes on that so that we can advise on policy on training changes or on legislative changes. And I'll give you one last example of why this might be important. There have been cases where there may or may not have been DCS involvement, but a child, prior to a child being born, a child is born with drugs in his or her system, and the parents then are continuing to use drugs. So a DCS case is created. And then the parent you've got a child addicted to a child withdrawing from very serious drugs, and that's a very difficult circumstance, trying to take care of a new child, but also a child that's withdrawing, an infant that's withdrawing, and then a parent who's still addicted and testing positive for drugs. And in my area of the state, we had a case where a baby was sent home that was drug addicted and went home to a struggling parent who had an addiction problem, and that baby died 2 weeks later. So, we may want to make policy changes that say, let's take a different approach on these instances. And that's the intent of us trying to have some more legislative oversight over the department. And that's my update.
All right, Erin, you have 5 more minutes if there's anything else you'd like to talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at 9:14. I thought I just had 1 more minute. So.
Yeah, on mine, it shows I kind of set the timer. So you have about 5 more minutes if you'd like to say something.
Well, I do want to acknowledge Hoosier Hills Marina in Du Bois County that had the terrible fire yesterday. And, just that our thoughts and prayers are with not only the marina owners, but the boat owners who had significant loss yesterday. And in addition to that, 2020 was a tough year. We were all trying to struggle through and learn something new. We hope that we never have to have another time like 2020 in our lifetimes. But we really are aware of the concerns that were raised by the public over the course of the pandemic about the governor's executive orders, for right or wrong. We are aware that the public does ask us to provide further input and consent to the governor in these processes, and it should be representative government. And so many of our bills, the elections bill, Senate Bill 5, Senate Bill 1, that I think Senator Messmer is going to discuss, and 407. There's a number of bills that are going through the process to help us navigate what may be, we hope will never come again, but we will learn from what we went through and hopefully place good laws on the books to prevent, further concern and really hope that if something should happen again, we'll be better prepared.
All right. Well, thank you. What 2020 has certainly taught us a lot, that's for sure, and has taught us to look at things in a different way and probably move forward in a different way. So now I would like to introduce Senator Mark Messmer, and he will have about 15 minutes or so to give his Indiana State update.
Well, thank you, Nancy, and for this virtual forum that we're working out of today. Just another casualty of COVID, as we can't meet like we normally did for legislative breakfast updates, but thank goodness we have the technology to do this. I would like just a follow-up comment to Senator Houchin's comments on Senate Bill 407, and I've heard from critics of the General Assembly, well, why are you trying to usurp the governor's emergency order authority? Well, does anybody not realize it's the General Assembly that gave the governor the Title 10 emergency order authority? Without that, he wouldn't have the ability to sidestep, the laws that he sidesteps, all of the provisions of authority that he is given and local health departments are given in Title 10 come from our granting them that emergency order status. And we are simply updating the process of Title 10 emergency order status in Senate Bill 5 and Senate Bill 407. So, for those who think the General Assembly doesn't have, anything to say in those processes, that they're the ones who have granted those agencies at the local level and the governor at the state level that emergency order authority. Otherwise, he wouldn't have it. So I just think that's an important clarification to make. And it's just setting up a collaborative process. And the way no one ever envisioned an emergency lasting more than 30 days. And what the current law says is after 30 days, the General Assembly can terminate an emergency order at any time. But the problem is we don't have any way, once we're out of session, there's no way to act on that ultimate oversight authority that we have. There's no way for us to activate it. So Senate Bill 407 sets up a process, as does the companion House bill, for that to play out. And it will result in forced collaboration. If the governor wants to extend an emergency order, he has to clearly delineate, what the terms are going to be of that. We can grant him the extension under Senate Bill 407 for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It doesn't limit us how long we can extend that authority for him. It says after 30 days, we have to be engaged. After 45 days, we have to approve it. So I think it's good. It's good for representative government. We live in a representative republic in this state, in this county, in this country, and everybody expects their elected representatives to be their voice. So I just think that's just good policy that was really borne out in the need in 2020. So my bills that I've been working on, my keystone bill for the session was Senate Bill 1. I started working on it back in April, May, June, worked on it all the way through the summer and the fall, and put together probably one of the best frameworks for civil liability protection for any states that haven't adopted a civil protection for all of their citizens. This is not just a business bill. It protects businesses, churches, schools, local government, nonprofit groups, everybody. And it sets a threshold for not being covered at gross negligence and willful misconduct, or fraud, or intentional tortious acts, which that would be intentionally ignoring all safety protocols. So we allowed it for acts of omission or acts of aggression. I mean, it applies either direction. It's retroactive to March 1st of 2020. It was signed into law February 18th, this past Thursday at 12:11 p.m. And it's probably the quickest bill I've seen in my 13 years move through the House and Senate. But that took a highly collaborative effort between me and Senate leadership, me and House leadership, to make sure we got that bill to a point where the House had their chance to weigh in and put some of their priorities. They just made some minor tweaks to it when it got to their side of the building, but things they thought were imperative. They had a companion House bill 1002 that had a few different things in it than my Senate Bill 1 had, and they took what they thought was the most important provisions of that and put it in committee, and got the bill to where this past Monday we were able to do a concurrence vote, and it passed with strong bipartisan support. It did in the House and Senate, and then was signed by the governor this Thursday. So very excited to see that bill put into place. If the state of Indiana, the economy of Indiana, the cultural, the societal norms that we all want, back are ever going to happen, giving folks protection from civil lawsuits, saying, I got COVID-19 at my church, I got COVID-19 at your store, I got COVID-19, wherever. We're never going to get to normal, and we all want normal, not the new normal. This was probably the most important bill dealing with COVID-19 that we needed to get in place. And it especially protects the smallest of businesses, those members that are the Jasper Chamber of Commerce. It protects them the most, the nonprofit groups the most, the volunteer organizations the most, who have very limited ability to fight a civil lawsuit. If you had to go through discovery and a trial and on a COVID-19 claim, it would cost you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's the smallest group businesses, the volunteer groups, the nonprofit groups, who just don't have the resources to fight that kind of a lawsuit. It protects them the most. I mean, the large employers, the bigger you are, the more likely you are to have the resources to settle and make stuff like that just go away without going to court. But it's the small folks that represent our hometown community businesses that just could never survive, and they've had enough challenges in 2020 that I'm just pleased as I could be to get this bill into law and provide certainty for everybody moving forward. So,
And Mark, did you say
the,
that bill has been passed and it is law and it goes retroactive back to March 1st of 2020?
Yes. Yep. So it is effective upon signature, which was Thursday at 12/11. So we are all covered by that protection, which is great for our state. Senate Bill 5 is the local government oversight. I guess I'll call check and balance. You know, kind of what we're working on with Senate Bill 407 with the governor, and I was a co-author, second author on that bill, and it allows anyone who is a recipient of an enforcement action by a local health department to appeal their case to the local legislative body. And in our case, in 90 of the 92 counties, that would be the county commissioners. There's 2 counties where they have slightly different makeups of their how their legislative and executive boundaries are set up. But it puts a check and balance. So if the health department or a health officer is going to put an enforcement action in place, and there's any chance that they would go to a business or a church or a school and issue a shutdown order of some kind or a penalty of some kind, it would give that person that's the recipient of that enforcement action the ability to appeal it to the commissioners. And the commissioners appoint everybody on the health board. They have to be representative of different segments of the population, different group, business groups, school groups, but they appoint them all. But once they're appointed, they have no real ability to remove anybody. There's no oversight of what they do. And in reality, what this will do, it'll set up a collaborative dialogue between the commissioners and the county health department and the county health officer that will require them to make sure what they're doing. Here again, we live in a representative republic. People need to have their elected officials to be able to go to them and say, I feel like I'm being abused. I feel like the oversight has been too heavy-handed, and I need someplace to appeal that action. And currently, there's none. You could go to court and sue them, but what kind of expense? If you're shut down, you're shut down. How are you going to afford to pay to defend yourself? So this really goes back to a lot of the same parameters in Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 407. It just puts accountability, to those folks by somebody that's elected to represent them. So that bill passed the Senate with a bipartisan support, and it's off to the House. I don't think there's a companion bill in the House for that one, so that one's going to be the basic framework for, how that process plays out. Another bill that popped up, right at the beginning of session was Senate Bill 144 that I'm the author of, and this is a good bill, a good problem to be dealing with. So Oliver Winery is one of the largest wineries in the country. They're numbered the 29th in volume of all wineries in the United States. We have current farm winery laws that allow them to bring in bulk wine that's 50% of what they produce by their own, growing capacity. But they have such tremendous growth in their out-of-state sales that they've had a 40% increase in their sales just in the past year. And with our current farm winery laws, they couldn't bring in enough wine that gets grown in California, or bulk wine that they bring in and finish the production of under our current statutes. And this bill would give them, for wine that's going to come in and then be shipped out of state to out-of-state customers, it takes the limit on how many gallons they can bring in, so they can continue to produce that wine here in Indiana and benefit the economy of Indiana through that process. So very, very happy with that one. And another bill that I was a co-author on, or at least helped put some of the language together on, that I think is a pretty important bill coming out of 2020, is Senate Bill 198. And we all remember last May 29th through the first week of June, the protests, and around here, all the protests were peaceful protests. No complaints with anybody anywhere who wants to protest what's going on in society, regardless, of whether it's a government action or something's happened in society. If people want the right to protest, they've got it. Their First Amendment rights are protected. But Senate Bill 198, what we saw happen in Indianapolis, it was just tragic. If anybody went downtown Indianapolis in that late May, early June, and saw the boarded up businesses, there was 112 businesses that occurred $8 million worth of damage over the 29th and 30th of May, of 2 nights of really destructive rioting. There was protests that went on for a few more days, but the absolute travesty of that. And it was not just the protesting; it was people who came in with the intention of stirring them into violent behavior. There was arson, attempted rape, assault. 2 people were shot and killed. 2 other people were shot and injured. Looting. I mean, the amount of destruction that happened to that community was just the vandalism, the spray painting of buildings, monuments that got damaged. Senate Bill 198 would allow for increasing in penalties for rioting if it causes serious bodily injury, death, or significant property damage. It adds conspiracy to commit a crime in a riot to be charged if someone wasn't actually committing the theft, but was orchestrating it through cell phone communication to a group of other people, identifying where the police were and getting and orchestrating the movements of those folks. It allows the Attorney General in rioting situations to prosecute for rioting if the local prosecutor refuses to or doesn't want to. It allows the Attorney General. We've got 2 other places where the Attorney General can step in and charge folks, with criminal activity. And an amendment that I added to the bill would allow a person to sue the local government for damages that occurs to their property if the local government shows reckless failure to protect the property damage during a riot. And the statutory limits on that are under current law are $700,000 per person or $5 million in aggregate. But since the riots, the damage took place over 2 individual nights, it would have put Indianapolis at a potential for property damage liability at probably $10 million total. For the 2 nights of protests that erupted into riots, and that should just never happen. We hope it never happens again. Indianapolis is our biggest city; it's the state capital. We just can't afford to have that type of reputation. For our the convention business, the tourism business, being the state capital. I mean, we can't allow that to be the image and reputation that people recognize our state capital for. So we've got to put some framework in place to protect our businesses and property owners in that situation. One other bill that I had worked on that'll protect folks like Hettinger Beverage here in town that I worked on was Senate Bill 175, and it would protect people that are in beer wholesalers from having their national distributor, Budweiser, in their situation, or what they call it, their primary source of supply, for terminating their distribution agreement without good cause. Right now, our current statutes just say they can't be terminated unfairly, but there's no definition of what unfairly is. And what Senate Bill 175 does is set the framework up of what fairly or unfairly would be. So we set definitions up of what good cause is for terminating and what good cause would not be. If a group like Hettinger's would lose their alcohol license, that's an immediate loss of their distribution agreement. But if they had issues with maybe not getting beer off the shelves in time before its expiration date, I mean, there's things that can be remedied, and they have time to remedy it, or if there's things that are immediate, they're immediate. Bankruptcy, et cetera, would be immediate termination. But it puts in place some parameters to protect the beer wholesaler from having their product pulled from them, with no notice, with no good cause, and puts in definition what fairly is in our current code today. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I too want to send my condolences to the folks who lost property in the fire yesterday up at Patoka Lake. What a tragic event that is for them. So prayers go out to them and all their families, and probably people who had a boat destroyed yesterday that don't even know it yet, or maybe they do by now, but that'd be a bad thing to wake up to find out. So with that, I appreciate your hosting today, and look forward to the last two. We'll wrap up the first half of session in the Senate on Tuesday. I think the House wraps up their first half on Monday, and we will have a long day the next 2 days with finishing up amending of bills on Monday and final passage of bills on Tuesday.
All right, it's been very helpful. Thank you to our state senators, Mark Messmer and Erin Houchin, for their updates on what's happening at the state legislature. And we will close this session, and we will open that again in a few minutes with our state representative, Steve Bartels. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So on our state representatives today, Shane Lindar was not able to join us today, but Steve Bartels is here, and we will give him about 20 minutes to tell some things that are going on in the House, and so a little bit different version of things that were going on in the Senate. So thank you, Steve, and we welcome you today.
Well, thank you, Nancy, for having me and my colleagues on here to kind of convey what's going on at the Capitol. And I want to thank TV18 also. I still have this habit of standing every time I hear the Pledge of Allegiance after 22 years of the military. I don't even think about it consciously, just get up. I want to start a couple of things. I know there's a lot of issues about the executive orders. We've been I know my Senate colleagues have several things going on in the Senate, along with some House companion bills. I won't spend too much time on it, but because they kind of covered that. But in the House, we really see those Senate bills. My personal thing is really supportive. Obviously, I'd like to see less government involvement. So if I'm ever going to err on something, I want to see less government involved in our lives as possible. So, but great bills, and they're moving forward. And of course, we've got one already signed into law. So I think that's definitely going to help the citizens. So a couple things I'm working on. Big, kind of a busy season for me this session. Couple things. There's a House Bill 1107, which is a graphic design bill. And what that really was, and I'm sending it to summer study, is that we're seeing a lot of schools do the safety mapping of their schools. So emergency services can know where buildings are and rooms. And when a neighboring community tries to help, sometimes these mapping of the schools are not electronically compatible. So I'm trying to figure out how that we can use these graphic measures cross county lines, cross school districts, and make sure emergency services are being able to read the same map, so to speak, graphically. So we're still kind of working on that. This is a grassroots issue that came up. It's kind of a great thing, but House Bill 1109. So, I was grateful not to have an opponent this last election, but I was still knocking on doors and meeting people. And I knocked on a door of a constituent that said, "Hey, I got a problem." And the problem was, from a veterinarian standpoint, was they're required to do daily reports on dispensing of medications, certain medications and controlled substances. The problem is, if they're going on vacation for a week or 2 weeks, or the doctor, or they're just closed for a day or two, they're still by law required to do a report of 0 every day. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. That seems like we could stop doing, things that are silly. So I started looking into it. This was across the state. It affected doctor's office, pediatricians, pharmacies. So we got and looked into it, got all stakeholders together, and I was able to change that law, and it passed the House unanimously. Was now that only time you have to do a report is if you dispense one of those listed medicines. So it just kind of cut down on the government insight into and overreach and creating more problems for us. So a big fight for me this year, which I didn't think it was going to be a big fight, was House Bill 1110, and that was small claims court. What I see here is that we as the General Assembly have kept increasing the amount that somebody can sue somebody for in small claims court. The problem is, if you're a business and the suit is over $1,500, you're required to hire an attorney and retain one and pay for it. Or if you need to sue somebody, it's over $1,500. You have to have that expense of an attorney. And it didn't seem fair. It seems like it should be balanced. The small claims is actually an informal court. It's supposed to be inexpensive. And I didn't realize I was stepping on the Supreme Court's toes. It was a rule that they had. They made it very clear that I was out of my jurisdiction. But I kept the bill moving, and they kind of succumbed to the the thought that the citizens and the General Assembly want this. So it passed, and they were able to give me a letter basically saying they support this and they're going to change the ruling. So now businesses can to represent themselves in small claims up to the limit. So that was a big win for the citizens on both sides. I'm still working in the drug donation program, working a couple years. It did not get a hearing, but it's huge. I think it'll help. And we'll just keep your eyes on that. I hope we'll see it next year. We got a new chairman, a lot on his plate. So it was supposed to be heard this year, but I think it'll be heard next year. The next bill that passed just recently was 1496. And this really started off with trying to help Mulsers in my district, but realized it was a problem across the state. And what it did was, back in 2014, a bill was passed that changed the permitting process. And it was kind of it was a circumstance that wasn't meant to be, but generally these aggregate companies will buy lots of land. Like there's places that Mulsers have purchased 60 something years ago with the intent of mining for rock, and in places in Shelbyville and North. And what happened is they buy these permits or get the engineering, get these permits, and that's good for the life of the project. Well, this bill inadvertently changed it to where they have to renew it every basically 4 years. And it created a whole mess of paperwork and nightmare and for the DNR. And so we were able to come to a compromise and fix that and kind of basically go back to the 2014 bill for the aggregate companies. And so that recently passed the House. Of course, the big thing too is House Bill 1003, part of the budget, where we looked at these school corporations and said, we're still going to fund 100% of the ADM, even though a lot of schools this year spent a lot of time in virtual school systems, and we kind of redefined what virtual really means. 1006, huge bill. This is the law enforcement bill that I co-authored. We started working on it in the summertime with the author, Greg Sturwald, which is an attorney. We went back and forth and lots of compromises on really what defines a chokehold, when can a police officer use a chokehold, and then the big part of this is we don't want bad police officers to leave departments and go to another department without the knowledge of their past conduct. So we basically opened up the employee records to be shared. So if there's a police officer that did something that was maybe rule breaking but not a crime, that would follow that person. And it helped the ILEA be able to look at more circumstances where a police officer can be, what's the word I'm looking for? It's decredited, lack of a better term. That's kind of what we do, is we decertify is the actual word. And then that way they can't be a police officer anywhere in the state. And so that was a huge bill, great compromise. Law enforcement loved it, and because we want good police officers out there. 1033 was one of the issues that we're having, is, as you could probably imagine, with law enforcement and fire departments, is it's harder and harder to get people to do these jobs, even apply. So there's a current law that says they have to live within this 50-mile radius. And all we did as a state was basically deregulate that by taking that requirement or restriction, so to speak, away. So that was a big win, especially a lot of communities that are on the border and able to get good police officers and firefighters from out of state. And there's some bill we passed last year to kind of help with those issues with out of state. 1396, this is my first year on public policy committee. So I'm seeing a lot of alcohol bills and firearm bills. So I was able to help a little bit more understanding with the alcohol laws on 1396, which is going to help some small wineries, distilleries. We're going to actually kind of have an Indiana rye program where we can have our own brand. Kentucky has their bourbon and stouts that down here in Southern Indiana. So we're going to be able to start promoting ourselves as an Indiana rye state, which is going to be good for us. House Bill 1150. So there was a big issue that I didn't realize was happening. So a truck is overweight, and this really affects farmers. So they're overweight by 50 pounds and they get pulled over. So they get a ticket, and the ticket is a criminal or an infraction ticket that basically says you're overweight, here's how much, and your fine is proportionate to how much you're overweight. And you're like, okay, you pay the fine. And then potentially what is happening, a year and a half, maybe sometimes up to 2 years later, you get another fine from the Department of Revenue for civil liabilities for being overweight. And I'm like, I didn't realize you could have double jeopardy in the state of Indiana, but you can't on these issues. So what we did is, as a co-author, I helped the author get this back to us, says, okay, we're not taking that away. We don't want to promote people to be overweight, but the state has a reasonable duty to say your fine needs to be within a year. And I don't think that's out of whack to ask them that you need to provide this documentation to make this claim less than a year. So we kind of tightened that up a little bit on that. I think the other thing is I co-authored with another Cindy Ledbetter, 1488, which is just to codify the fact that employees cannot be forced to take vaccinations of non-approved vaccines. There's federal regulations on that, and a lot of people are not understanding of the current vaccine is it's an emergency use vaccine. It's not fully approved. And so therefore, currently, until it's that way, we're not going to allow employers to force this vaccine on employees as a matter of employment. So that's kind of what I've been working on. There's actually several other bills that I've co-authored, but the list is long. I spent a lot of time helping move the needle in different directions from more of a backseat kind of scenario this year, which has been helpful. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Steve, that's very helpful. Since we have a little bit of time, would you want to explain the process of how a bill goes from, let's say, the House to the Senate, to the Senate to the House, and what happens during that process?
Sure. So we'll just take a House bill. So, somebody has a great idea like me, and well, you think so, right? We all have great ideas. So, we filed a bill, and once the bill is filed, then we spend a lot of time trying to get the chairman to hear it. So, chairmen do not have to hear bills. So we work our issues with the chairman and say why this is a good idea and plead our case. So let's say we get the chairman to hear the bill. So then it's set for a hearing. So then we'll have people come in to testify. And obviously you have people testify for and against. And so they come in, we hear the testimony. Then we basically discuss it and vote on it. So, and there's sometimes we've had several bills where after testimony, the chairman said, we're going to hold this bill until we get more testimony or answer some questions. So once it passes the hearing process, then it goes to the House floor. Once it goes to the House floor, it becomes a second reading. And so anybody now in the House will have access to that information and the hearings. So they can say, I don't particularly like this portion, so they can add an amendment, a second reading amendment to this, changing the bill. Sometimes you actually see people strip the whole bill out, and it's not even the same bill. But there's that process. It's frustrating sometimes, but they have that opportunity. So we discuss that. We vote on amendments. So let's say the amendment doesn't happen. It's still the same bill. Then it goes to the third reading. And at the third reading, then there's still discussion. At that point, hopefully you get your third reading vote and it passes. Then we send it to a sponsor. I like to name Mark and Erin I like to send stuff to them since we're friends and we kind of do those kind of things. But you find another senator that will carry that bill, and they go through the same process. And they'll add stuff to it, just like we add stuff to Senate bills. And sometimes it changes it to where the original author says, no, I don't like this. And that's where you kind of get to this conference committee, where then after both sides have kind of agreed to something but really don't like it, we sit down again and try to hash things out. And then at that point, hopefully we all agree and the conference committee signed off on it, and it goes to the governor. So that's kind of a quick scenario of how that happens.
Thank you. That is very good to know. Sometimes people don't understand the process. And so it would be good, I think, if everyone had an opportunity to spend a day at the State House, but that's not likely to happen in most people's schedules. So I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Again, thank you to our state representative, Steve Bartels, for being here today, and to our local media and to WJTS TV 18 for being our host. So thank you very much, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.